All right, I'm Greg Staley from Diverge Media. We're excited to bring our guest on today. Today we have Jim Karahalios, the leader of the New Blue Party, joining us. A little background about Jim. Jim is the leader of the New Blue Party of Ontario. He's also a practicing lawyer with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. Since 2016, Jim has led campaigns to bring accountability to the political system and to offer real conservative policies to voters. These include advocacy campaigns like Free Your Policy, a campaign that successfully amended the Conservative Party of Canada's constitution to make it more accountable to the grassroots. More well known of Jim's campaigns would be the Axe the Carbon Tax campaign, which has single-handedly changed the political landscape in Canada, uniting conservative leaders against the Trudeau carbon tax. In mid-2017, Jim led another campaign fighting against voter fraud that was determining internal PC party elections. In November of 2017, the Ontario PC party sued Jim in an attempt to silence its advocacy against carbon taxes and voter fraud. This was the first time as a Canadian political party had sued a private citizen. Jim persevered, and with the support of his wife, Belinda Karahalios, he won in court. The ruling the court said the PC party was using, quote, strategic litigation against public participation. In 2018, Jim ran for the Ontario PC party president position. In this campaign, he promised to bring integrity, accountability, and transparency to the party. The party then used voter fraud and other undemocratic methods to stop him. The lawsuit surrounding this case is still in court. That brings us to 2020, where Mr. Karahalios was removed from the Conservative Party of Canada's leadership election. He was in third place and well positioned to surpass the eventual winner, the Red Tory Aaron O'Toole. Jim took the Conservative Party to court over his removal and was reinstated in the party, only to be disqualified a second time without a legitimate justification. In October of 2020, Jim's wife, Belinda Karahalios, was removed from the Ontario PC caucus, along with 17 allies from the Cambridge PC Riding Association Board of Directors, because Belinda stood up for Ontarians and voted against Doug Ford's authoritarian power grab, otherwise known as the Lockdown Bill, Bill 195. All of this led to the creation of the New Blue Party of Ontario. Jim, in 2021, fought through brief battle with osteosarcoma while fielding a New Blue Party with 124 candidates for the Ontario election on June 2nd of 2022. Jim is a builder and a leader who has displayed great integrity and character in his time in politics, often at great cost to himself and his family. And now Jim is continuing to build a future for Ontario voters with the creation of the New Blue Party of Ontario, a party that is promising voters a real conservative option. Thank you for joining us today, Jim.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. 5 kids keep you busy.
I wish I had 5.
It's if you got money,
have a football
they're
team.
awesome.
Speaking on Super Bowl Sunday, I'd have a football team of kids, but it's easier to say that when you only have one. But they're a lot of fun. So most important part of my bio you didn't talk about, I coach my son's hockey team, and he's playing U9. So I didn't think I'd be able to skate again after the cancer in my right femur that you mentioned that I had in 2020 and 2021. I can't run anymore because they took out most of the femur bone and 2 of the 4 quads and a full knee replacement. So my right leg looks like half the size of my left leg, and I was always bow-legged, but my right leg's now straight because I have my femur got replaced with like an internal prosthesis. And then my son Victor wanted to start playing hockey this year, and I forced myself to like get back on skates. And then when we joined the house league team, they didn't have a coach, so I volunteered, and it's like a lot of fun. And I'm one of the assistant coaches on his rep baseball team, so that stuff keeps me super busy, but it really puts things in perspective. So I'm sure you're having a lot of fun with the 5 kids.
Yeah, it's kids are awesome. Like, and I'm doing the baseball coach thing too, and
good for you.
It's it definitely opens your eyes a little bit because dealing with that many kids, you learn a lot about yourself in the process. That's for sure.
Yes. Yes.
So I touched on it a little bit in the opening there, kind of circling around why New Blue was created. But for voters who may not be familiar with you and who New Blue is, what's the 10,000-foot view? How did New Blue come to be, and why are we here today?
Yeah, there's a lot of voters that don't know about New Blue, and that's understandable because the three parties that, well, I guess four, the Greens are an establishment party now. The four parties in Ontario that most people know, the PCs, the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens, they've been around for, in the case of the first three, over 100 years. The PCs, the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens have been around since the 50s or the 60s, I think. So we're talking about over 60 years for each party. And we started our party in 2021. It was officially registered. And I was sick, so Belinda was a young mom with a sick husband at home and going to Queen's Park as an MPP. Didn't miss a shift at Queen's Park, so to speak, if you can call them shifts, or an opportunity to speak. Didn't miss very many votes, which you can't really say the same about others. For example, Randy Hillier, he just stopped going to votes after for the last 2 years. And so that limited our ability to go out across Ontario and do activities, especially where I was in a hospital bed, couldn't walk. And more importantly, we went into the 2022 election, but we don't get really any coverage out of the mainstream media or even the independents. Like True North doesn't cover us because True North is funded by establishment PC donors. Like, that's not a secret. You can research that. They only covered us near the end of the right before the writ dropped. Then they decided they covered provincial politics. They ignored me for a really long time. Really disappointing, because Andrew Lawton was a supporter of mine when I ran for PC president. But you know, when you got a job and it's funded by establishment PC donors, what are you going to do? So they only decided to talk about us in the same breath as Derek Sloan's party. Ezra Levant has not asked to interview me since 2020. Pre-cancer. I can't get on with Ezra anymore. So we don't get he has his like second act commentators interview us. And Ezra interviewed Belinda once when she got kicked out of Queen's Park, but Ezra will never ask me to go on as leader of the New Blue to his main show, which gets the most views. So whether it's establishment press or the independents, they're all tied to one of the establishment parties. And the New Blue is the party that dumps on all the establishment parties. We're not friends with the PCs. We're not friends with the Greens. We're not friends with the NDP, and we're not friends with the Liberals. We're truly like the David in the David of Goliath battle. So there's a lot of Ontarians that don't know about us. And having said that, though, 121,000 people in 2022 found out about us. 121 or 127, I can't remember.
It was
and they voted for us.
7,000 you had.
Yeah, I see. I always cut myself short. And then it's a very like high conversion in terms of when they hear about us. If you like any type of fiscal responsibility or social values that are not radical and reforming the system, we get people that really like our platform. And unless they're like a far lefty, they'll hate us. But they're open to it because we're presenting really mainstream ideas and solid, conservative, principled, true and blue is like what we like to call it, ideas. And we have a track record. You know, we're not lifelong politicians, and we have real jobs, and we're not spending our time just doing this stuff all the time, because we're raising our son and involved in the community. So the New Blue Party is the alternative, and we've got another election coming up February 27th. We thought we were going to have 4 years to get ready, Greg. And this guy, this premier, wow, it's unbelievable. He's taken advantage of a situation, called an early election, caught a lot of people off guard. You know, we knew it was coming. We were sending emails, but candidates don't believe that it's coming, right? And the voting public doesn't believe it until it comes. And the Ford government's put everyone to sleep, so Ontario voters don't really pay attention to provincial politics as much anymore. But having said that, I think we're 20 candidates shy of a full slate. So we're over 100 candidates. And there's a mad scramble here in the last 3 days to get the final 30 to 40 registered. So they're out hustling, getting signatures. And every day we're onboarding 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 more. And they're always supporters who've been active. You know, they manage someone's campaign. They're a riding president. There are donors. They're volunteers, and they just were kind of hesitant to run. And they see the opportunity to have a candidate in every riding. Because if we don't run a candidate in Nipissing, you can't vote for us. And we were polling our highest pollings in the north, for example. And people are starting to understand that, and they're stepping forward and building up the courage to finally put their hat in the ring. So it's super busy, and we can only build. Like when you're starting at a good base of 127,000 people, and most people in Ontario don't know who you are, haven't heard of you. There's only votes to acquire, because it's like being Pac-Man in the video game. You just like got all these, you're just going around gobbling up. Like there's just so many people that go talk to you and say, "Hey, there's a new party." What? Huh? It's not like we're fighting 100 years of, you know, I hate the PCs, or I hate the Liberals, or I hate the NDP, or I hate the Greens because my grandfather voted like that, or grandma. But the challenge is, getting the word out, and the word gets out by pounding the pavement and talking to people in our communities, and that goes through good candidates.
Yeah, it's a process, especially when the mainstream media shuts you out, the independent media shuts you out, and it's unfortunate. Like you said, dumped. You know, when you dump on all the establishment parties, but that comes from, I think, you know, you're trying to do the right thing, and you just call it out when you see this isn't the way, and you know, that upsets obviously people within that establishment. But it's unfortunate because there is a real conservative alternative in the new Blue Party that you guys are pushing forward. And you talk about your history a little bit. You've been fighting internal party corruption since 2018. You ran for the PC leadership. They kicked you out. They had issues with you. You know, they didn't want you, I don't think, to actually have a real chance. But this is kind of 10,000 foot view without getting in the weeds. And now, you know, not to get too far in the weeds again, but like it's like they're funding alternative parties to try to maybe split the vote, you know, in terms of the alternatives.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. The funniest thing, so you're talking about, like, to be specific, the Derek Sloan party is a party that was set up just to make it look like the right-leaning options were divided, and to kind of, not kind of, it was a deliberate attempt to reduce our presence, because he presented, after ignoring me for a meeting and ignoring the opportunity to work together, which I knew he was going to do, because he did this to me in the federal leadership in 2020 when we were in that leadership with O'Toole. His team was in that race, and they got him in the race to make sure that the supporters and the donors that signed up for my leadership race didn't leave the Conservative Party of Canada, and didn't leave that leadership when they were going to kick me out, because Aaron O'Toole needed Derek Sloan's second place votes to beat Peter MacKay. And Aaron O'Toole's the one that got me disqualified. And the way to keep my voters in the race to help Aaron O'Toole beat Peter MacKay was to get a stalking horse like Derek Sloan there, who came out of nowhere and copied everything I said. Everything was like basically a ripoff of my platform. And that's because his advisors are dirtbags in the back that I used to work with. And they fooled me for a long time, pretending like they were my friends, but they were just there using my volunteer work and my abilities. And it took me a long time to figure it out, because I was young and dumb. But you lose enough hair and you get older, and you realize who your friends are. So Derek Sloan came back at the end, right before the 2022 election, January. We were ramping up. My health was better. The pastors from Liberty Coalition, Mike Thiessen, Aaron Rock, Michael Clark, the other dirtbag, they drove into Cambridge. They had a meeting. They sat there. My first meeting out of a hospital bed, finished chemo. I was limping up the steps. They sat there and they said, "Wow, Jim, are you really like healthy to do a campaign? In other words, we thought you were dying." That was an exact quote in the meeting, was, "Are you sure you're healthy enough to do a campaign?" And the other one was, "We can't believe that you guys have riding associations set up and candidates, that many candidates already, because we thought you were sick." And then the third one was, "How do we make this party less Karahalios centric?" Pastors didn't like the idea that a party was being led by a husband and wife team. Okay, this is the best. And then they left that meeting and they went off and they plotted immediately. Never heard back from them. They plotted another party. First, they tried to get Randy Hillier to start a party. That fell apart. And then they went with Derek Sloan. And they had churches all across Ontario with pastors going into the churches and asking people to run just to be a name on a ballot. That's it. Most of their candidates did nothing, except for Tom Marazzo, who put out a video defaming me, and a couple others like that. And then after the election, when we beat them, they disappeared again. Derek Sloan, Randy Hillier, they've said nothing about Doug Ford for 2.5 years. Derek Sloan's party got deregistered because he didn't do his accounting and his audits that are required by Election Ontario, so they canceled the party. Then he got it re-registered. The way he got it re-registered is there's 2 ways to get a party re-registered. You need to get 1,000 signatures to re-register the party, and he was trying to do that and he couldn't get them. Or you run 2 candidates in an election at the same time. Okay, so where's there an election in between generals to get re-registered? Doug Ford called 2 by-elections at the same time. When the second by-election, it was the Milton by-election in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, he didn't have to call the second one for 4 more months. But he decided to call them together so that Derek Sloan could re-register the Ontario party. The mainstream media will never report this, but I know that's why they did it. Because you would never run to like a by-election on another riding within 3 or 4 weeks of the MPP resigning, which is what he did. And Derek Sloan got re-registered with his party. And then even though that party got re-registered, he did nothing. For a year, he said nothing about provincial politics until they found out that we were saying we had over 60 candidates already signed up for this election. And we were adding more and more. And then just last week, they said, we're getting in the game. We're starting a party. It's Marazzo, it's Sloan, it's Randy Hillier, the dirtbags of Ontario politics who say they have these great values and they're just there to cause obstacles and suppress the conservative opposition to the mainstream conservative parties. And they're scrambling and they're going to get some candidates together. And then I'm sure Rebel's going to cover them and True North's going to cover them. And it's a tough battle, right? Because it's hard enough fighting against the establishment parties as it is. And then you've got these yo-yos on the side who've got nothing better to do but to go on social media and attack me and defame me and whisper campaigns and say terrible things about me. I haven't mentioned these guys in 2 years, 2.5 years. And they're out there on social media crapping all over me. So they'll sign people up because they've got connections throughout the province through the PC infrastructure. And the PC infrastructure are churches in every community and other local campaign activists. Funny enough, though, Marazzo and Hillier aren't even going to run. So Marazzo and Hillier are out there telling everyone else to run, but they're not going to run themselves. So they just want you to sacrifice yourself, go on a ballot. Our riding president's my wife, Belinda. She should be the leader of our party. But she's a young mom who doesn't want to be the leader. And as her husband, the leader always gets blamed for everything when you're running a political party. So candidates that leave and they're discouraged, it's Jim's fault, right? So I don't think my wife needs that. But she's the president of the party. And she's a former MPP. And she's running again because that's what you do when you start a political party. Tom Marazzo, though, he's too good for that. He's not running. Randy Hillier, he's too good for that. He's not running. They're just there to send out emails and tell people to run against Jim Belinda. So
they haven't. I think the Ontario Party social media account on X hasn't posted since February 2023.
Yeah, they just stopped. Yeah,
and then they just pop up. There's an announcement of an election, and all of a sudden they got their hands out and they're asking for donations again. And then they put out a newsletter specifically attacking you. And calling you divisive and toxic, not to give any oxygen to that. But I thought it was funny in a sense because in the same breath, it was like the very next sentence. And if you're a supporter, a candidate, or a member of the New Blue Party, you should join us. Like the most toxic and divisive.
They didn't have candidates, right? They didn't have candidates and they weren't doing anything for 3 years. So their first play was, if you're a New Blue candidate, come join us, right? And if you go there, you'll probably get some money because they have money. Like they have donors that are giving them money, right? Michael Clark, who was the Ontario Party campaign manager in 2022, had called one of our, listen to it, grade 12 high school student who was helping the New Blue. After the 2022 campaign, Michael Clark called this grade 12 high school student and told him he wanted this high school student to design websites for municipal candidates that Michael Clark was going to run in municipal campaigns in Ontario, and to work on Josh Alexander's campaign. And he instructed the high school student he could just charge these Christian candidates anything that he wanted. And Michael Clark wanted a 10% kickback. So he told this high school student, you could tell these candidates, because they'll listen to me. If I say you're the guy to design the website, they'll pay you whatever. So you could charge them $2,000. You got to give me $200. So he was ripping off Christian candidates. This is the Ontario Party campaign manager in 2022 and a co-founder of Liberty Coalition. Okay. That's what these guys were doing in 2022 because they have the money to do it. So they were ripping off their Christian candidates, and they were, I'm sure there was another time where Marazza was offering one of their former candidates some money for some fundraising that Sloan was doing. And the candidate turned it down and said, beat it, take a hike. And they left the Ontario Party. So that's what they do. They throw money around in the back. The high school student told me immediately that Michael Clark proposed this. And we released the information because Mr. Michael Clark is the campaign manager for a political party. And I think that voters and donors are entitled to know. And of course, I'm the divisive guy that the New Blue Party released that information. We release facts. Those guys are just liars and scumbags. But it's the sad part about it is, Greg, is that people sign up to support them and people sign up to put their name on the ballot. And so if you're running for that team, there's only two reasons. Number one, you're protecting the Doug Ford PCs. So you believe the Jordan Peterson garbage, which is, oh, the PCs might be bad, but if the Liberals were there, it'd be way worse. That's the propaganda tool of the PC establishment. They've got Jordan Peterson saying it all the time. I don't know if Jordan Peterson does it on purpose or if he's a fool when it comes to politics, but it's one of the two, right? So they believe that. A lot of people believe that, and they run for the Ontario Party to suppress the New Blue vote because they've been brainwashed to believe that if the Liberals win, things will be worse. I got news for everyone. The Liberals and the PCs in Ontario put in place the exact same policies. It doesn't matter who wins. The lobbyists have the parties tied up in the back. The rhetoric is different, so it might sound better to you, and it might, satisfy the internet addiction that people have to go hit like on a tweet. But the policies in the back are the same. Like Doug Ford said he was going to get rid of the carbon tax. He actually put in an industrial carbon tax that's exactly like the Trudeau one, no different. They're still pushing DEI in the schools. New Blue talked about that 2-3 weeks ago. Belinda wrote a really good email expose on that. The other reason you'd be running for the Sloan Party is you're ignorant. You're a fool. You don't know anything about Ontario politics. You don't listen to what people say. You don't track their behavior, right? That in between campaigns, they don't hold the Ford government to account. And you don't understand the basics about politics, and you refuse to see what's right in front of you. That these guys continuously set up shop right before an election to suppress the New Blue vote, and they're doing it the second time around. And I'm not mad at those people because eventually they're going to realize it, and they're going to figure out what they're going to want to do. But Sloan's going to get candidates, and they're going to acquire votes, and they might beat us. They'll beat us in some ridings. Like if Sloan's going to run, he's got a brand name that's been pushed by True North and Rebel and all those outlets. They'll beat us. They might beat us overall. I don't know. You can't predict the future, but they're in it as long as we stay. If we did not line up candidates this campaign, they wouldn't be doing anything. They'd run 2 candidates just to raise money and make sure their party gets registered, and they would stop. But the more candidates we run, the more of a push we do, the more they come out, they attack, they call us names, they get angry. And it's sad, but what can you do? Like, Greg, I'm past the days of trying to convince people.
Yeah.
We put out a product here, and it's a party based on grassroots members. They put policy ideas. We had a convention, a conference last year. People came forward. We put our first policy declaration. We're the only party in Ontario that has a grassroots policy declaration proposed and voted on by members. None of the establishment parties have this anymore. PCs don't.
Wouldn't be able to control the process, and that scares me.
Right. So we put it out there, and there were divisive talk in the conference about Bitcoin, about Israel, about types of tax cuts, sales, personal income. We just let it go. People, got frustrated. It's grassroots democracy. But I'm like past the stage of my life where I worry about trying to convince a voter that they should vote for us. You don't want to vote for us? Don't vote for us. It's the future of their province and their kids and their grandkids' province. And when they figure it out one day, they can send us an email and say, you guys were right. Because nothing's forever. We're not going to do this forever. I can't do this forever. We do this as much as we have the will, and as much as God provides the will to do it, and as much as we can. But, I work as a lawyer. I got to provide for our family too. And my son, I kind of neglected him for 2, 3, 4 years in the beginning of his life. The first couple of years because of the political activities in my career, because I was working on the corporate side. And then when I got sick, and then when we ran U Blue. So put more time into my son, but we keep this going, and we got a great slate of candidates. I think we got better candidates this time around than we did the first time. And they're out there hustling, and they're doing a lot of work. And Leisure Marketing finally put us on a poll, and we look like we're tracking better than we were the last time.
Which always under where you seem to end up, right? You always seem to poll lower than the final result.
Last time that was the case, but this time, like the Leisure poll that came out, I think it's like higher than where we were from Leisure last time. But I don't know. We'll see. But the big challenge here is we got the deadline on Thursday at 2:00 to submit applications with 25 signatures, and we've got 30, 40 candidates still hustling to get signatures and get their paperwork in. And we've got returning officers hired by Elections Ontario that don't really know the rules and are trying to find reasons to disqualify our candidates. I can't read is that Fred? Is that what that name is? Fred? I can't read that. Fred, go get another signature. So it's a mad rush. And then we got about 20, 24 ridings. I can't remember. I lost count. I think we're down to 20 that still need a candidate. One of them is Ottawa West Nepean. And then, I don't know, there's like 10 of them in Toronto, which is always just so hard to find candidates to run in Toronto because it's like just a big wasteland of politics. There's so many ridings and so many people in Toronto aren't paying attention, right? So we'll see. But every day people are coming on, and it's looking good.
This idea of there's any alternative or any difference between the legacy parties, the NDP, PCs, and the Liberals. It's comical, and I said this to you, but the Fraser Institute put out that if Doug Ford had just kept Kathleen Wynne's spending limit per capita, there'd be like $27 billion less debt.
Yeah. So they're saying Kathleen Wynne was like more fiscally responsible than Doug Ford. That's so crazy, right? Like she
got booted because she was so bad fiscally.
Radical leftist, right? Radical leftist. So the plan, the strategy that the conservative operatives do in Canadian politics. Look, you know why I know this? Because I got fooled for a long time. I thought the way to make change in Ontario politics and to make a difference was from the inside, right? That's what they say. And in theory, it makes sense. Like, why would you start a new party when you could just win the leadership of the provincial Progressive Conservative Party and make it more conservative, right? So I got involved in leadership races. I was doing the policy drafting for Monty McNaughton and writing his speeches. And I'm the one that went with Monty to meet Rob Ford and get the Rob Ford endorsement. And then Monty became a cabinet minister and abandoned all his conservative principles. And then in the second leadership with Doug Ford and Tanya Granite-Gallen, I was the one on the phone with Tanya, helping her out. I was on the back end with Doug's team. Doug I got to run for Patrick Brown's platform. No, Doug, you don't need to run on Patrick Brown's platform. So I was a firm believer of working it from the inside, kind of like Trump did with the Republican Party, right? You take over the party. The problem is the U.S. system is different than the Canadian system. So in the U.S. system, the internal party races are protected by law. So they can't just disqualify Donald Trump because they don't like him. They can make it harder, and they can do things like that. But by law, they can't kick him off the ballot. In the Canadian system, the party operatives can just kick someone right off the ballot. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you, but yeah, we lost your webcam.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, they could just kick someone right off the ballot in internal party races in Ontario. And so that's a lot different than in American politics, where the system's protected and they can't kick people out.
Yeah, because there's nothing governing internal part. Like from what I've heard of you in other interviews, essentially you could stuff ballot boxes in theory, and there's nothing like an internal party race, like the internal presidential race of the PCs. There's no law against that.
Yeah, so I ran for PC president. I thought that was the last way to like try to be in charge of the party governance to make sure that their nominations were open and they wouldn't disqualify conservatives. And they rigged the vote against me. And we're still in court. It's been 4.5 years, and we just got past discoveries, and we're going into mediation. And I'm hoping we can get a court date next year and wrap it up. So I tried to sue and do the just thing, and the legal system just grinds you down. Like I've already spent way more money than I can recoup in that lawsuit. Like I'm never going to get the money spent back, but I didn't do it for money. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And I had hundreds of people pay, I can't remember what the delegate fee was to go to that convention, and they got hotel rooms and spent the weekend, and the vote was rigged. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And pro-life groups like Parents Are First Educators, they were in on it. They were not informing their people that the vote was rigged against me, because the activists behind that group, who are tied to the PC party, wanted to protect Brian Patterson, who was crowned the president. And then ever since that PC executive race, they don't do elections anymore. So the next PC president is one of Doug Ford's campaign managers from his leadership, Michael Diamond, who's a lobbyist. They just picked him and they said, "You're the president." And no one ran against. So there's no elections in the PC party, but there's tens, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people probably across Ontario be like, "Oh, come on. What are you starting a new party for? You just got to change it from the inside." Okay, you go spend 15 years trying to change it from the inside like I did and sacrifice time with your family. And when you do it, congratulations. But you're not going to change it from the inside, because that's not how it works here.
No, I think that's kind of your story, is when you get close, when you prove you can circum the odds. They didn't give you the voter list as an example when you ran for the federal leadership, and you still raised the money.
Yeah, I didn't need it.
And then they found an excuse to kick you out, and then you won in court, and then they came up with another reason. So there was never any intention on letting somebody that was bringing forward what the grassroots really wanted. And that's the fundamental issue, is like, this is what people are telling you from the conservative base, and they're elevating a candidate forward, and they just said, no, not going to happen. People in the back room decided this ain't the guy, and we're going to remove him.
That's how all their leaderships are decided. Yep. So the Conservative Party made a mistake in that leadership with Erin O'Toole, that they let me on the ballot, right? They let me on the ballot because they were like, this guy's never going to raise $300,000, because that was the first leadership in Canadian politics where the entry fee got spiked from 100,000 to 300 or 250. I can't remember.
I think it was 300,000.
Okay. Anyways, it doesn't matter. It was an astronomical amount of money, and you had 3-4 weeks to raise it. And we just rented an office in Cambridge, with volunteers, no paid staff. I think I had maybe 2 paid staff at like minimum wage, and team of volunteers. And we just sent mailers out to conservative donor lists. That's public information. You could just get names and postal codes and ask a mail house to fill in the details of the address. And we just mailed people. And we just told the truth about who was behind Erin O'Toole and who was behind Peter MacKay, and stopped the red Tory coronation. And the money just flooded in, and they didn't know what to do. So they did two things. They put Derek Sloan in the race, who did not raise $300,000. I don't know. No one's ever looked at the financials after. Derek Sloan claimed that he got the $300,000 to get on the ballot in that leadership. He didn't. He got a loan from the bank. And the Conservative Party decided that the rules allowed for that. And they let Derek Sloan in on the ballot with a loan. And then after you're on the ballot, right, then money starts coming in, like millions of dollars to those leadership candidates. I got the $300,000 before Leslie Lewis and Derek Sloan. They kicked me out. I sued them to get back on the ballot and to get access to the money because we were running up a debt. I won, and then the next day after I won, they kicked me out a second time. And at that point in time, the membership cutoff had passed. The leadership was well down the road. I think the debate had started, or the debate had happened, or it was going to happen in a couple of days. So we said, can't keep suing. Like, I can't go into debt $700,000 or $500,000. And people stopped donating to help me fight because they were donating to Sloan, because Sloan was saying the same things as me. It was very strategic, very like genius. These guys in the back, the way they design the stuff is very, very smart. You know, it's not Derek Sloan. Derek Sloan's a dummy. He doesn't know how to, like, you know, be strategic. And it's not Tom Marazzo. I can tell you that much. Tom Marazzo can't. When he called me in 2020, wanting to get involved in the New Blue Party, Tom Marazzo, he's one of the first phone calls I took. I spent 40 minutes on the phone with him, and I had to explain to Tom Marazzo why ballot, citizen-led referendums aren't, you can't do that in Ontario. It's not Florida, buddy. Like, I just had to nicely say, Tom, there's no mechanism in Canadian politics to do a citizen-led. Oh, he had no idea. So it's not Tom, it's not Randy, it's not Derek that tell these guys what to do and what to say. They got people scripting them, and they're smart, clever, ruthless, wicked guys. Like, they know what they're doing, and it's tough to fight against it. Like, I'll tell you, we're doing it with a small team, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. I mean, people know the New Blue Party. Belinda and I were in church a couple weeks ago, and there were a couple of parishioners talking about the New Blue Party, like right next to us, really loud. And they were like, yeah, the New Blue Party, they say the right thing. But I don't know, don't you? The other guy's like, I don't know, don't you think, split the vote? They can't win a majority. They're new. And Belinda was like, they're talking about us right beside us. And I said, I don't think they know it's us. So I don't take that. Most politicians like Rick Nichols would get insulted. Like, oh my goodness, you don't know who I am? I'm Rick Nichols. I take that as a huge success. When more people know the party than know us, then I know we're going somewhere. If people know the leader more than the party, there's a problem, right? Because there's only X number of people that are going to know Jim Karahalios. For the New Blue to grow, it's got to be X plus, 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 right? And we've got to have candidates that are running that are going to be the next leaders of the New Blue Party. And we got awesome candidates. Like, we got Rhonda Jubenville. After she ran for the New Blue, she got elected to town council, city council. She's been getting in a world of trouble down there because they keep throwing her to the integrity commissioner for saying common sense things. And she's running for us again. And after my wife, Belinda, Ron is the best candidate we got. And we're really lucky to have her. We have Keith Ben right next to her running. Brilliant guy. Like, Keith's just brilliant. He's got everything you need to know about wind turbines and the ripoff they are. You just figure it out from Keith. And across Ontario, we've got great candidates, better candidates than we did the first time. And we've just got to keep building and highlight them. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, no, and it is a compliment, because if people recognize the party, if not you, it means you're building the brand bigger than your name.
Yeah, and that was the motivation for calling it New Blue. It's something simple, catchy. You're going to remember it, and right away when you hear it, you know what we stand for. I remember when I was talking to the guys that were behind the Ontario party before they gave it to Sloan. They wanted Belinda and I to lead that party, right? And I talked to them, and it was Raphael Roche and a guy named Jay. Okay. So this guy, Jay, was the guy in charge, and ultimately he wanted me to give him a job at Queen's Park for his party. So think about that. His party that just ran two candidates in an election. You know, it's like not worth much. He wanted me to go to my wife and say, you got to hire this guy because he's going to hand us over this party. So we politely declined. And we said, we registered the New Blue Party with Elections Ontario. And we said to Jay and we said to Raphael Roche, guys, why don't you merge your party into ours? Because I don't want a generic party name like the Ontario Party. They had the great idea that you got to name it Ontario Party because you want to fool people, right? You don't want people to know where you sit on the political spectrum, right, left. You don't want them to know. You want something bland that will appeal to everyone. It's fundamentally dishonest, right? Like we're a right of center, right leaning, right wing conservative, whatever you're going to call it, fiscally conservative, socially conservative party. And we're not pretending. We're not lying to people. We have candidates that run that don't agree with everything we say. And they didn't want to join us. And then Raphael Roche went to work on finding people to lead his party to oppose our party later on. But yeah, New Blue, it's catchy. And I think more people in Ontario know what New Blue is than they know Jim and Belinda. And that's a good thing.
No, it is a good thing. And kind of the lead into some of the things that your policy, the new blueprint put out, HST cut, wind turbines down, nuclear energy, water, in terms of affordable energy for manufacturing. These are some of the common sense ideas that Doug Ford campaigned on in 2018, and then it quickly abandoned his base, right? The first abandonment was the carbon tax. He promises to get rid of cap and trade, or he gets rid of cap and trade, then brings in an industrial carbon tax when no one's paying attention. Promises cuts to the middle class, never does them. But here we are again in an election, and he's promising, the conservative rhetoric is strong, but you can't trust the guy to implement any conservative idea that he's ever talked about. Because if you look through his 2018 campaign promises, there's a lot of good ideas. He never did any of them. So
yeah, half the campaign promises he put in his first campaign in 2018, the one Belinda ran in under the PC banner, his leadership was basically a ripoff of the Axe the Carbon Tax, Take Back Our PC Party campaign. Like, I was running a campaign called Axe the Carbon Tax and a campaign called Take Back Our PC Party. It was against Patrick Brown. And, wait a sec. Fast forward 2025 and Derek Sloan's running a campaign called Take Back Ontario. Wow. That's kind of funny how that works. Doug Ford was running on Axe the Carbon Tax, cleaning up the PC Party. He came in, he got rid of cap and trade, and then he put in an industrial carbon tax and let Trudeau put in a consumer carbon tax. So a lot of people are fooled because it's not reported that Doug Ford put it in, and they associate the carbon tax with Trudeau. Same with COVID, right? Most people in Ontario associate COVID with Trudeau, but it was Ford did most of the policies. Trudeau only came in at the end on the border with the truckers, very, very end. And Trudeau did that after Biden actually told him he had to do that on the border. But the one drawback on the convoy, because I was there the first weekend, there's a few negatives about the convoy, but the one political was it gave Doug Ford and other conservative premiers huge cover because they got to change the narrative to Ottawa and it's all Trudeau's fault. But we had a policy convention last year. We had New Blue members across Ontario come in. They proposed policies, and we've got a policy declaration on our website, and it ranges from fiscal to private school tax cuts. If you're not sending your kid to public school, you should get some of your taxes back to give people more choice for where they're going to send their kids to school. Great way to balance the budget too. From being against the carbon tax, defunding all climate initiatives from the provincial government, defunding DEI initiatives, which the Ford government continues to do. Those are just some of the policy declarations, and it's on newblueontario.com. We're really proud of it too, because it's hard work to get a grassroots policy process put together.
It was one of the things that I liked was in talking about how Doug Ford acted in Ontario. Like he was one of the worst provinces in all of Canada in terms of lockdowns and restrictions.
Right.
And you're right. And suddenly they tried to blame Trudeau, like Trudeau's the bad guy at the very end of that. But no, like you fired nurses as an example, and this is the guy that campaigned on ending hallway medicine, and then in the midst of COVID, fires nurses and healthcare professionals because of a vaccine mandate. And that's one of the things you guys have vowed to overturn, to bring back the fire nurses and vaccine mandates as an example.
Yeah, we've been fighting for them with online since COVID, and we've kept it up. And Doug Ford's made hallway medicine worse, right? Like the wait lists in Ontario have gotten worse. And he didn't help the situation during COVID, and he's done nothing ever since then. He could easily, through a stroke of a pen, he doesn't even need legislation, a directive from his minister to tell hospitals to hire back those nurses, and he won't do it. So it's a real shame, but there's lots of people out there that cover for Doug Ford. Oh, it'll be worse with the Liberals. Oh, he's doing a great job standing against Donald Trump, whatever. Just total nonsense. But, it is what it is. It's really hard, Greg, to break a 100+ year brand, right? PCs have been around for over 100 years. People want quick solutions, right? They're like, Jim, why aren't you figuring this out in 3 years? This is ridiculous. How are you only getting 127,000 people in Ontario to vote for you? First, the big problem is Rob Ford was not my brother, right? If Rob Ford was my brother, we'd be at 20%. Doug had the luxury of having the best politician in Ontario's history, Rob Ford, as his brother. And then he gets to ride his coattails the whole way. And that's a strong brand because Rob Ford died for that brand, right? Doug is not Rob. Doug is Bizarro World Rob. If anyone knows Superman comics, he's the opposite of Rob Ford. But he's got the same last name, so he can ride it. And then Doug's nephew, Michael, rode the last name into Queen's Park, and he just retired. That's the first problem. The second problem is it takes a long time. So a lot more people than 127,000 know about the New Blue Party. They're not necessarily going to vote for it because they have all these built-in prejudices and fears in their head that if they vote for the New Blue, the Liberals will get in, things will get worse, or they just quite simply, they don't have confidence in the brand enough because it's too new. They need to see it on the ballot over and over. One of the most interesting things about 2022 was the night of the vote, New Blue was trending on Twitter above Liberal NDP PC because people were leaving the ballot box and they were like, what's this New Blue thing? And they were tweeting about it. And that's why it's so critical to get our name on a ballot every by-election, even if we don't do so well, because you want every single Ontarian to walk in the ballot, read the list, and see New Blue. And it sticks in their head, and they leave and they talk about it. So all those PC voters are going to see it now for the second time, and they're going to leave and they're, wow, this party's still around. I thought that was just a COVID party. I thought they'd die by now. That's how you build it. And eventually there'll be a tipping point, kind of like we saw with the BC Conservatives. I don't know if I'll be around for it, but there will be one.
Wow. Well, I hope you'll be around for the tipping
I meant
point.
As leader of the party.
I understood what you meant.
I appreciate your concern, though. Thanks.
That's not at all. No, I think what's going to happen is, unfortunately, if things continue to get as bad as they're heading, I'm one of the 100,000 people leaving Ontario every year.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's unattainable for a lot of young people, especially.
Yeah.
And it's not looking brighter under Liberal, NDP, or Progressive Conservative because it's the same thing.
Yes.
And as that happens, I think people will desperately start to look for something New Blue and bring fiscal responsibility back to the province. And that's where the breakthrough is going to happen. They're breaking themselves down, which will help the breakthrough.
Yes. With the money, eventually the money runs out. And then regardless of what party's in power, someone's going to force them to restrict spending, either the bank or their debtors. Their lenders, and they're going to be in debt. Someone's going to tell the province that's enough, right? Kind of like they did to the Chrétien Martin Liberals federally. Those guys didn't balance the budget because Paul Martin was some great fiscal conservative. No, they had to balance it because international lenders were telling Canada this is out of control. On the social side, more concerning because there's no bank telling you that you're destroying your social fabric, right? But there are voters and there are parents, and we're starting to see some of that pushback, right? Where you're starting to see the the federal conservatives, who didn't want to talk about woke stuff at all for a long, long time, started adopting some of our rhetoric. Stop the woke campaign that we did in Ontario on critical race theory, and then the Poilievre team picked it up. So you're starting to see voters push back, either parents on the social stuff or voters on the fiscal stuff. And the public will demand it, and the political parties will have to react, or they're going to become extinct.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to end it. I know you're a busy man. Is closing pitch for the new blue?
I have one pitch before we get to election day, which is check out newblueontario.com. We've got 20-something, 21, 22 ridings left where we need a candidate. If you know someone who wants to get on the ballot by Thursday, email us at info@newblueontario.com or do the contact us page. And Greg, we're going to do this again after February 13th, and we're going to talk about election day so we can do a deeper dive, and we'll have a better lay of the land after Thursday on February 13th. We'll know how many candidates we've got. We'll know if we've got a full slate of 124 or 100. And we could talk further going into election day.
Sounds good. I look forward to having you. And that's Jim Karahalios of the New Blue Party of Ontario. You have a real conservative option on the ballot February 27th. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man.